All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Very excited to have you join us for yet another candidate conversation we have with Vote ATL. Vote ATL is a collective of a number of grassroots and progressive organizations in Atlanta that are making sure that folks in our communities are informed and engaged about the upcoming municipal elections on November the 2nd. My name is Rohit Malhotra. I'm the executive director at the Center for Civic Innovation, and I've had the pleasure of having conversations with a number of folks who have put their name in the hat to run for mayor of this city. Wanted to just give a little bit more about the Center for Civic Innovation, this initiative, before we jump in with Glenn Wrightson, who is running for mayor for the second time in this city. So. The Center for Civic Innovation is a now 7-year-old organization that has been fighting to solve inequality in our city. The main things that we do is, number one, we try to make sure people are informed and inspired to act on inequality. That inequality in the city has been widening for decades now, and that is important that people know that that's happening, but also that they are inspired to do something about it. The second thing that we do is that we make investments and amplify the work of community-based leaders. We believe that Atlanta has had a long history of amazing people inside of our communities who have been solving against inequality well before today, and that it's important that we uplift and amplify the work that they are doing. The third and final thing that we do is that we advocate for policy change. We do that through long-term research initiatives, like an initiative we just completed on the neighborhood planning unit system. We've also done research and are leading an effort around investing in Black-led, mission-driven organizations in our city. And our goal in pushing for individual change, organizational change, and systems level change is to eventually see a city where people's voices are heard in our local public policy and in our decision making. As a part of that effort, we were thrilled to partner with a number of community-based organizations to launch Vote ATL in the 2021 municipal year. So I wanted to give a big shout out to a few different organizations. One is the Connect Cooperative in Westview, which is doing amazing work to build cooperative businesses and cooperative economics inside of their neighborhood. Wanted to shout out Blue and Green Consulting, which is doing work inside of Ashview Heights to make sure that communities are heard and that communities know what is actually happening inside their neighborhood. And the third is Community Movement Builders, which has a national model for community-based efforts and organizing work that they do inside of the neighborhood of Pittsburgh. So thank you to the three of them. Also, thank you to On the Grid and Butter ATL, who have been our media partners on this. And thank you very much to Mr. Glenn Wrightson, who is with us today for this conversation. The way this conversation is going to go is we'll get to learn a little bit more about Mr. Wrightson and his background and his vision for the city. And if you have further follow-up questions, you can put them in the chat. You can put them online. You can send them to us. Send a pigeon if you need. We will get it. But this conversation will last about an hour, and then we will take it from there. So with that, it's my pleasure to say hello again to Mr. Glenn Wrightson. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We're very grateful for your time, and wanted to kick us off with the same question we've been asking every candidate for mayor, which is not about your vision for the city or why you're running for mayor, but why public service for you? Where does that come from in your life? Where did that stem from, and why is that important to you?
Public service is the premier thing that somebody can do, I believe, at certain stages of their lives to try and do things that benefit the community. So I'd like to be a part of that.
Where does that come from for you? Where did that come from? Your family
I
upbringing?
think it I think it came from my parents, from my family, and my upbringing. My father, I know, worked with Fulton County Family and Children's Services, and his hand was typically sore because this is pre-computer. He signed the welfare checks back in the day, back in '60s and '70s. And then I know my mother always mentioned how she was proud that she and my father were the first people to donate to the Hosea Williams food drive when they first started that. She was proud of that, and she donated blood. She was a blood donor with the Red Cross and had a 18-gallon pen that she was proud of. She had very rare blood. So I think from my parents, I saw that example being set. And while I've not been terribly active in an organizational, as you say, or a systems level, individually, I try and make contributions on an individual basis to people. And
That's
now
very
I'm running for
cool.
mayor to broaden that and try it that way.
Awesome. Where'd you grow up, Glenn?
Well, the first 8 years we lived in Gwinnett County. Then we moved to Atlanta. I attended Spring Street Elementary School, where now the Center for Puppetry Arts is located. I went to Henry Grady High School, now Midtown High School. So I guess those were the formative. The lived in the country as a youngster, and my father called it a gentleman's farm. We didn't do farming. He worked in the city with Fulton County when we lived in Gwinnett County, but he drove Interstate 29. Georgia State 29, Lawrenceville Highway, into the city every day. So,
Wow.
but the country, and then we moved to the city. I became a city fella.
Do you, do you consider yourself a city fella or country fella? What
I'm a
makes you happy?
I'm a blended country and city fella. I
Okay.
have an appreciation for nature and the simple things, and at the same time I have an appreciation for what the city can afford and offer. The arts and all.
Uh, and do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a brother who lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and likes living there.
Okay. Have you gone out there to visit him?
I have. I've visited my brother in Albuquerque.
Okay. Very
He's
nice.
he, he's a geologist, and I call him a rock doctor.
Okay. What would he call you? How would your brother describe you?
That's an interesting twist question. He would say I'm innovative, that I'm an explorer, that I do well with challenges, and that I am not terribly bashful.
Yeah.
I think that's what he would say. That I'm not so much of a spectator
Yeah.
as I am a person that wants to be on the field. I'm not a real great spectator.
Hmm. Were you always interested in politics? Were you kind of a student government person who then went on to do that later in
Well,
your career?
that's a good question too. There's a lot of good questions. I forget the sequence there, but I think in the 10th grade in high school, grade in Henry Grady, I was maybe the vice president of the class, and then my junior year, I think I was the president. And then senior year, we had co-presidents of the student body, and I was the guy co-president, and there was a lady, a woman that was the co-president. So we were co-presidents of the student body. I'll name drop and mention that when Dorothy and I were the co-presidents, Yolanda King was the president of the senior class, I believe, that year. So I knew her from student council.
Oh,
and
cool.
then went on to be the vice president of the state student council, and then I was on the national steering committee back in high school, and I left student government at the end of high school. I was not involved in politics or student government when I was at Wake Forest University,
Okay,
where I attended college.
got it. What for you? What years are we? You don't have to give away your age, but what? I'm sure you're in your late 20s by now. But what years were you in high school and college?
Well, Henry Grady High School was eighth grade through 12th grade at that
Okay,
time. And
okay,
I graduated from Grady on May 20th, 1970.
got it.
And then I managed to graduate from Wake Forest University in the 4-year attendance period there. So
What a fascinating time in history, in Atlanta's history, to be a young formative mind. I mean, being in eighth grade to 12th grade. I mean, you're graduating in 1970. A lot happened,
a lot happened.
particularly in the 60s and in Atlanta, as it pertains to civil and human rights. And what was your perception? Because you're definitely old enough to hopefully remember it. Um, what was your perception of what was happening in Atlanta around race in our city?
I've never fully understood the issue of race division. I remember the I remember when there were four washrooms at public places and two water fountains, and I never quite understood that. We my I think it was the example that my parents set. They were not they didn't originate in the Southern tradition. So I think from the example they set and the way they treated people influenced me. But the 60s and 70s were not only interesting, but there was some apprehension during that period, because there was some, I don't want to say turmoil, but there was some change in the air, it was I remember the late afternoon that Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. I remember where I was and what I was doing and who I was around at that time, and there was concern. I remember when the 8 students were killed at Kent State University by the National Guard. That had a tremendous effect on me. When the 8 college students at the university were killed by the National Guard, that and the Vietnam War, that was it wasn't a topic that went without discussion.
What was that
I'll
discussion
just say
like for
that.
you? For you, among your peers, among your family, where did you fall in that discussion? What was your perception of what was going
Well,
on?
I didn't know anybody that wanted to go halfway around the world and try and kill people they didn't know or didn't have any reasons to kill. I
What about
didn't
in their
feel
own
like they
city?
had any reason.
So
And I know people that,
less so on the Vietnam War, and more so right here at home. There are a lot of people who didn't want to go halfway around the world to do it, but we're clearly fine doing it right here in Atlanta. So, well, where were people on kind of? Where were you on the topic of race as it related to kind of the kind of systematic push and to ensure that Black people in the 1960s did not achieve the vote, the right to vote, did not, there was a big stand against integration, and that wasn't like it was so far away. And in Atlanta, particularly in the time that you were here, was a majority white city. I'm curious, just because I don't I don't get to talk to many folks who lived in Atlanta during that time. Would love to get an understanding from you. You got majority white folks in the city. How are they talking about race? How are you perceiving that? What does that make you
I think people were concerned. I think they were
concerned about? What?
the people I knew were concerned that there might be some sort of a revolution. Um, the I always questioned the division at Ponce de Leon, where the roads changed names from Boulevard to Monroe and Moreland to Briarcliff. I thought, well, what do we why do we have this division in the city? And I'll mention this if it makes any difference to anyone. Is I moved to Grant Park, where I now reside, in 1978, and I have been told that I was that I was the first. I don't like to say it this way, but I've been told that I was one of the first white fellas to move into Grant Park area, and I didn't give it a second thought. I could afford the house. I had the down payment money and $1,000 down payment and owner financed. I didn't have to go to the bank. So I may not fit the mold of how many other people may have felt. And when after I finished at Grady, I went to North Carolina to a private college, Wake Forest University. So I had some insulation. I was studying classical Greek and biology and finance, and I may have been insulated from
That's part of
the real world.
That's part of where my questions are coming in. Is if you fast forward to today, it's I was trying to understand kind of where and how you process conversations around race, and whether that was informed by your upbringing, because today it's less of a combination of either insulating yourself from it or even being willing to integrate or whatever it might be. It's more about recognizing that race plays such a significant role in the way that people experience
True.
life and the way that services are delivered. And so, if you're mayor, um, a true understanding of the role of race, not a yeah, I know it's there, but I'm a good guy, right? How do we move from what is your understanding of how race plays a role today in the differences in which services are provided to one neighborhood versus another purely on racial lines? Is that something you have an understanding of? And if so, can you give me a little bit of insight on how you?
I may not have a clear understanding that there's a significant difference. I know that the Buckhead residents want to leave the city. Some of the Buckhead persons want to leave because they feel like they're paying more than their fair share, that they're paying extra dollars and not receiving extra services, if you will. But I'm not certain that I know the answer to the disposition of the city government to the racial inequities. I don't know that. I think
So well,
I don't think anyone would deny that they exist, but I don't know how the city government responds to that. I mean, all the trash is to be.
Yeah. We could take where maybe you were trying to go, which is maybe just mobility issues, right? So if you think about where our sidewalks continue to have cracks in them and continue to not have repair versus where they are rapidly responded to, a city service, if you will, it is clear that depending on where you live and who you have access to, that response rate is a little bit faster in some places than others. You would agree with that, right?
It is. I
Yeah.
imagine it is.
So that to me is a micro version of what happens against every every single potential city service.
And I've seen that with other municipal systems.
Yeah. So if you're a mayor, what
My
do you do about
career, I might should mention, my career has been with consulting with cities on their finance and how the money comes into the city and how the money is allocated to the different departments. And I've seen that firsthand where the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I've seen that where
Yep.
they where we need to go fix it on a smaller, much smaller scale with small municipal systems. I'm familiar with that, and
Yeah.
I
So
don't doubt that it
how
happens in
would you
Atlanta.
correct? How would you correct for the sweet squeaky hair grease gets the attention? How would you how
Well,
would you account for that?
would not the priorities of the work be based on the task to be accomplished as opposed to what part of
Yeah,
town
but
it's
we're not.
located
Look,
in?
I mean, you've studied Greek. I've studied philosophy. We're not talking about theoretical circumstances here. Like what we're talking about is in real time in Atlanta, the way that services are delivered has a disproportionate effect today on residents based on their zip code and based upon their identity. That is a study after study after study has shown that. That's just a fact of you coming into the role
Well,
of a mayor.
I think that would be a better question for the former mayor and for Mayor Bottoms. I think I don't understand why there would be
Well,
a
Mayor Bottoms isn't
hierarchy.
running, so I can't. I have asked her these questions when she was running, so that's on record. Mayor Reed is continuing to dodge our requests
Sure,
for interviews. But
I imagine
I'm
so.
asking you, Glenn. You're running for mayor here for the second time in a row. People are looking for an understanding, and we can move on to other topics. But I do think it is important, given the time period in which you grew up in Atlanta, which you are. A lot of your campaign is built around the fact that you've been here a long time and that your roots are in Atlanta. Like you understand Atlanta. Second thing you've talked about is budget prioritization, which is something you have familiarity with. You've done
Right.
consulting on, and we know that the budget itself is cut up and dollars move disproportionately by community. And so I'm trying to understand how do you correct for that? That's that because you're not running to be CFO, you're running to be mayor.
And I think that without, the new quarterback may not know the opponent's defense until he gets on the field. I mean, just to give an analogy, but I think that what I would seek to do is to reach to the city council members, and they reach to the NPUs, and have a better understanding of where we need to go, and not just have one person sitting in an office dividing up the budget.
Okay.
But I don't understand why we would have the hierarchy so much as we would the infraction, the necessity to fix this issue right here. I'm stalled out on the hierarchy issue, and I
Okay.
think that would be a better question for the former mayor and the current mayor.
Uh, do you think you can win this race?
40% now, they say, of the polls, according to the polls, of 40% are undecided. And
You think those
I mean,
40% are just waiting for you?
well, if they're smart, they if they want to see some change, if they want to, I'm not keen on that, and I don't plan on making any empty promises. I've heard a lot of empty promises already, but if they want to sense that there's a change, if they want to feel like things are getting better, then I would think they'd vote for me. Yes.
So what would you do? What's one singular thing that you can promise?
Well, that singular changes the question there. I think the one thing that I can promise is that I would not make empty promises to get elected, and that I would do the best
Are you
job I
dodging my
could.
question, Glenn?
Well, I'm
It
trying to
sounds like
answer.
you're dodging my question.
Okay, ask it again. Let me make sure I
So
don't dodge it.
I'm curious. Like, I mean, come on, man, you're running for mayor of Atlanta. Like, you got tens of thousands of people who are going to vote in this election. You have put yourself, your family through this process. There
I
is
understand.
a now folks are tired, and folks are also like hurting right now. So it's not a game, right? So I
I
presume
didn't
you're
think it
in this,
was.
and I'm not even saying that you view it as a game. What I'm saying is you are in this race. You are a contender and a candidate. There's no poll that has mentioned you. There's no like name recognition of Glenn Wrightson. Um, and then
It,
I'm trying to give you an opportunity to say, all right, let's talk to that 40% who would say, I don't like politics as it is right now. I don't know who my candidate is. What's one thing you can tell them that a Glenn Wrightson administration would prioritize?
I think that I want to go back to the publicity. There's articles about this committee for a better Atlanta. You're familiar with that, and the scorecard and how they plastered on the newspaper that I did not participate in the survey. Glenn Wrightson did not participate. I was not invited to participate. So that affects your polling, how
Yeah,
you
no, that's
poll.
not
And
good.
if the AJC only features the candidates that have already been on the city payroll and mostly ignores the other 9 candidates, then it's difficult to move up in the polls,
Oh, no qualm with that.
especially
Uh,
when you finance your own campaign. And I'm not asking people for money. I don't like to beg people for money. But the one thing that I would like to focus on is the deliverables and the fact that the money comes into the city, and you have to pay your property tax, or they'll sell your house on the courthouse steps. So you've got to pay your property tax. The one thing I think we should do is maximize the use of those funds that come into the city, and not have fancy banquets at City Hall, and not spend the money that doesn't need to be spent for the
what do you want to
services.
spend it on? What's the main thing you want to spend it on?
Well, I think of course we need to provide trash pickup. We need to, I mean, that's been hurt with the pandemic. All the services have been hurt with the pandemic. But we
Okay, so
need
what do
to,
you want? Where do you want the budget to prioritize? You just said trash pickup. The city does trash pickup. Yes, there are slowdowns because of the pandemic.
right.
Just like any other service provider, the city is struggling to provide certain
I
services.
mean,
What do you want to do with the budget?
well, I mean, if you prioritize, you've got police and fire, water and sewer, trash pickup, roads maintenance, and I think we've got to get the money featured in those categories for those basic core services. If we can do a better job providing those basic core services, we could have money left over in the budget to do other things.
Like
That's
what?
that's pretty much my emphasis, is let's do a better job of the core services that we have to provide, and then
Give me
we'll
one
have money.
service. Give me one service that you would change the way we deliver it, change the way we finance it, and how will it look different, and how will it be better
And
under
that may
Wrightson?
be back to the when the quarterback gets on the field, he sees the new defense.
So you're telling me you'll tell me if you become mayor, otherwise you can't tell me what it is that you would prioritize if you were mayor?
Well, I think I've tried to tell you just
No,
now
I'm
that
just
I
looking
would.
for an issue area. But what you told me is you've diagnosed the challenge. I believe wholeheartedly that you have a strong understanding of
and
what the
and
budget looks like. What I'm
I
trying to understand is if
what's
you
the
are the
solution? I,
executive, where do you move the money?
I understand, and my campaign slogan, if you come up with a campaign slogan, is solutions before politics. But
Okay.
I think
You're giving me
I
a lot of
think
politics. Give me some solutions.
I understand, and I think that that I would have to sit down with middle management and learn the organizational chart and see what these different departments, what services are they rendering and how effective. We've heard with this pandemic and the drug suppliers the word efficacy, and that's a term we could use, I think, with city government. Are we getting the results from the city government for the money that's coming into the city government? So I would start with middle management and go through line item if need be, or employee classification, and see, are these, you may have not seen, others have, I know. I've seen work crews where we've got 8 men on a work crew, 4 city vehicles, and 1 man operating a pressure washer. That costs money when we've got 8 men on site, on a job site, with 1 man operating a pressure washer. And that extra money, I'm sure it helps that individual household, but it takes from the pie, it takes from the community pie. And I think we need to do a better job with the deliverables. And we hear about affordable housing. I've got some questions about that. One is, if we're so concerned about affordable housing, why did the former mayor sell Fort Mac to the movie producer? And could people not have lived at Fort McPherson? Affordable housing or unaffordable housing, and they say it's going to get worse, and I feel like it probably will too. The living expenses are going up. That has to do with how the city government performs and the productivity of the city government. And were the city government able to reduce the budget, there would be more money for a household to pay their rent or pay their mortgage. All the variables fit together. There's not one item that's going to fix anything or everything. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer your question, but I would start with middle management.
I feel clear about. I think that it sounds like, to give credit to the response. Like, I think that it sounds like what you're talking about is that you think there's a lot of wasted dollars on inefficiencies within city government. And so a priority for you would be to look where we are spending excess capital and reduce excess spending, and by way of, when you say put money back into the pockets of people, that would be to kind of lower the tax burden that someone would have. Is that a fair summation, or what?
I think you've said it. You've said it maybe better than I've said it. But I know the former mayor is boasting now about when he left office, they had $200 million excess in the budget. To me, that's not much to brag about. That means you've overtaxed the citizens. And we know he raised the taxes during his term. So I wouldn't brag about having $200 million surplus money. One thought I had recently is I hear where the state of Georgia has excess of near $3 billion. And I've been asking myself, can some of those dollars be rolled back to the municipals and then pass through back to the citizens?
Yeah.
The government doesn't need to over collect. That's something I've learned in my career. The government is there to serve the citizens, not to penalize the citizens and accumulate all the money.
What would you do? I think you're definitely not getting into just the typical politics. You are certainly hitting on. You do a great job of problem identification. Like, look, here are the challenges. I see an issue here. Government can be better here. Government can be better here. Government can be better here. I hear that we need to do better on the budget, do differently on the budget. I don't know that, number one, that fits too clearly on a t-shirt. But like, I'm trying to think of like, how does someone, like, I'm thinking about if I go to a bar with my friends after this, right? And which I may do. Don't
blame that on me.
If that's the case, and I'm trying to pitch Glenn Wrightson, right? You can understand that it's a little weird for me to be like, before you order this drink, let me talk to you about Glenn. Glenn just wants things to be more efficient in city government, um, as opposed to getting clear on, okay, this is where Glenn stands on whether it's affordable housing, or this is where Glenn stands on policing, or this is where
Well,
Glenn stands on this. Like,
oh,
help me get there.
and you're doing an excellent job, by the way, of capsulating this. I have no objections, and I'm you've already said you're tired of hearing it, but empty promises to get elected is not what we need.
I don't want an empty
That's,
promise. I
and
want a
and
I
and
want
and somebody to say
a
I'm
policy
gonna,
solution.
all of the candidates except for myself and one other individual said that they would commit to building 20,000 affordable homes in the next 4 years. That's near impossible,
Why is it
absent bringing
impossible?
in mobile homes or building geodesic domes. So, if you're looking for a Glenn Wrightson candidate to say, "Oh, I'm going to build 20,000 affordable homes for everybody in the next 4 years," I'm not going to do that
No,
because I
but how
think
many
it's near
minimum homes
impossible.
could you build, Glenn? Okay, so let's say,
I
okay,
think
look, here's a policy debate then. Okay, you're saying 20,000 is too much. It's an empty promise. Fine, right? There's data and housing
But
experts
those
that
people
will
might
debate
get
that.
elected. Those people
No,
might
so
get elected. That's the problem.
Glenn, forget eyes on your own paper, man. I don't care what those people are saying. I'm talking to you. I'm giving you a platform. So I want to know for you, if we can't do 20,000 units, right? So fair policy discourse. You believe 20,000 is a unreasonable number for us. Fine. What is a reasonable number that you think that the city of Atlanta could produce over the course of the next 4 years under your administration?
I think we could. I think we could construct uh, maybe 3 a week, which
Okay.
is what there's 600
Yeah.
600 to, I'd say 1,000 units. We'd target 1,000 units in the next in the near term.
Got it.
We need to think in terms of multi-unit, and we
Okay.
need to think in terms of multi-unit around the transit nodes,
Yeah.
because then you help with affordable housing and the traffic issue.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so, but I'm not going to say we built 20. That's almost silly. Somebody, a candidate in a major city like Atlanta, saying, "Oh, I'm going to commit to build."
Yeah.
Those people are getting elected. We've already elected those kind of people before.
It's funny because you're likable in the sense that you're telling. I mean, it's true, right? There's a bunch of folks get on here, they make a bunch of promises, they don't keep them, or they recognize the government is a little bit more complicated than maybe it was as a candidate than it is to actually govern.
That
I think that's probably the case, and I think there was a really interesting piece in the Washington Post that Mayor Bottoms did that I think, where that recognition was there just about the complications of actually governing. And I think that's fair. I do think people overpromise, underdeliver. I just want to understand what I agree with you. I think there's a ton of people that agree with you. It's actually why they don't vote, right? They kind of say,
right,
look,
right.
why should I even vote? Because at the end of the day, so and so is going to say whatever, and then I'm not going to do it. But you got to motivate them to vote, right? So if you really want people to come out there, you can't just say, well, this is broken, ask that guy,
I
ask that
understand.
guy.
I
So
understand.
why should I check the Glenn Wrightson box on there?
If you check, if I'm elected, you're going to have somebody in the mayor's office that can analyze things and can think about things and can solve problems and can figure out what needs to be done. And to say that I've got the solutions now would not be prudent. Would not be responsible.
I got
So
you.
I understand the dilemma. I understand
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. One thing that I haven't heard anybody much talk about, the climate issues and environmental issues.
So what would you
And
do about the climate issues and the
I'd say,
environmental?
I would say, because you've got to set a level of respect for the government. The citizens have got to feel like they're in a community and that the government is helping, if not lead the way, at least support their beliefs. And I would say that I think it would be responsible for the city of Atlanta to say that we're going to phase out plastic bags, plastic grocery bags. I'd like to see us phase out the gas-powered leaf blowers. We need to phase out the combustion engines for the small vehicles, the fleet vehicles for the city, and move to EV, electric vehicles for the city, and have more charging stations. I see Kroger now is constructing charging stations at some locations, Kroger grocery store. Back to the upbringing and the history and my background in the 60s and 70s, I probably read every piece of work by Buckminster Fuller, and he predicted the cell phone, and he invented the geodesic dome. And I have an appreciation for that type of thought where you can do better. You can manage things better than they're being managed now. And I don't have specifics about, I would add 3 people to Parks and Rec, and I would add 6 people to this office or that. I do know, and the public should know too, that if we add 600 or 750, I've heard the number of police officers, that with shift change and vacation, that's going to maybe put 200 officers on the street. And if I had my preference, and I've been ridiculed for saying this, if I had my preference, we would have no police officers. Nobody break the law. We have no police officers. Now there's money there to benefit the community in a real way.
Look, you're the first person, I will say this, and this is something I will talk to my friends about, is the first person to say it would be great to have no police officers. Now, we might have something interesting there, because I think that's interesting. I don't think that's something to be ridiculed about. I think it actually is something to celebrate, which is at a certain point, there is a over policing on certain issues. And when I say over policing, there is someone just cited a statistic for me earlier this morning. Segura Jones with the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition was telling me about the citations for jaywalking. That 78% of citations for jaywalking are given to Black people. And I mean, I probably jaywalked to get to this interview, right? I'm sure you've jaywalked here and there, in your day.
Try not to. Yeah, I try not to.
So, of course, right? But I'm just saying, 78% are for Black males. I mean, that's wild.
That's got to be disproportionate.
So how do we? I might agree with you here. Like, how do we make it so that policing is not necessarily the solution to the challenges that we're talking about? Maybe this could be your differentiator, Glenn. Like, maybe you could tell us about a real way to solve our public safety challenges.
Well, if I could do that, I wouldn't be running for mayor. Would I? I'd be running for? I'd be a king or something, maybe. But the one thing, and I mean, I don't have all the answers, but one thing I would do as mayor, and I think Maynard Jackson did this, is I would go to the high schools and talk to the student assemblies, and that makes an impression at student assemblies. I presume they still have them. And I think that would be a good measure. I would hire, if they would accept the position, I would hire Andre Dickens and Antonio Brown to head up some sort of a youth work program. I think they'd be real good with that. But the police issue, I don't know how we cure that. And I think 78% is disproportionate to the infraction, I'm sure. But that has to be an underlying motivation to find guns.
It's called racism. It exists. It's there. There's not racism doesn't.
Well, they need retraining. I mean, they need to be advised on.
Well, I'm not even saying that it's not even that. It's not just training, because I'm not calling officers directly racist. It is a racist system. Like this is a policing is a system. And there are officers that will agree to this. That is
Well, I
set
mean,
up.
90% of the persons incarcerated are of African American heritage. I mean,
That's
ancestors.
that's weird, right? I mean,
It
I think
seems kind of
most people
strange.
think it's weird. I think most people look at that and say, you know what, maybe we got a problem. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe this
Well,
like
some states are legalizing marijuana. You know, that's that that
sure. So
that.
it sounds like I'm just trying to get on an interesting tangent, but I think like the for me, I do think challenging the way that we think about policing and the response to policing is an extremely important interjection into the mayoral conversation because
Yeah, I think so too.
there is kind of on one hand I'm going to hire 8,000 off. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm going to hire a bunch of officers and that's going to solve crime. On another hand, it's like we're going to open this facility, that facility, that facility, and we'll lock folks up, and that'll solve the crime. And then there are other folks who are like, I don't want to do any of that. I want to do this, or this, or I'm going to do programming or whatever. And the truth is, like, we're not actually addressing the core root. And it's not like Atlanta is unique to the rest of the country
No,
where
not at all.
I mean,
Not at
crime
all.
is up everywhere, and there is a commensuration between it's commensurate as poverty rises, as folks are losing money and losing their homes,
Yeah.
crime goes up. This is
Yeah.
Batman taught us this is not hard, but I
Yeah, there's
haven't
not
seen a solution to it from a leader.
it's out of balance. The equation is out of balance. It needs to be balanced. And
Yeah,
that's something that the city government can participate in. I don't know if it's the sole cure. You don't have
yeah,
the I think most would agree the family unit is essential to responsible citizenship. But
yeah, yeah,
it's a complicated issue. There's no question about
yeah,
that. It's and I, I'm not in favor of where we have repeat offenders on the streets. That's an issue there. They say, well, crime is up. Well, a lot of it's the same persons out there committing the crimes.
yeah,
And the police officers I've spoken with said that's the biggest issue that they're faced is that they're arresting the
sure.
same people over and over. So,
I think
how do
yeah,
you
I think
fix that with a court system or the prison system? I mean, it's a challenge, and I don't
yeah,
have all the answers. But
yeah. No, it's going to be an important thing. If you were
I want to
elected.
mention a couple other things before, if I may. I don't want to interrupt your
Yeah,
lead
I
here.
had a question that came in from online that I wanted to be able to ask you that's related, and then we can get into some of the other talking points you might have. Um, we had a question from Janessa Williams, who said, "How do you intend to invest in community programs that actually target poverty, homelessness, healthcare access, job readiness, that actually address the root causes of why crime is, especially petty crime, is going up? What would a program or what would the right intervention look like for something like that?"
And I'm probably not going to give the premier satisfactory answer, but I'll say this much is that with respect to programs, I think that too is an area where there's maybe programs that exist now that are not functioning to their maximum efficacy, where they're not producing the results. I hear and read in the newspaper where a program will get funded and then the funds don't make it to the people that are needy. And somehow or another, the funds, 70% of the funds have disappeared. There's only 30% of the funds left, but only 10% of the expected participants benefited.
Sure.
So the programs, the management of the programs, I think, is a place to start. I don't know about adding new programs until we correct what we've got and make sure that the programs we have are benefiting the people they're intended to benefit.
Yeah,
And that's a management issue.
yeah,
It's with respect to homelessness. That's that's I talk with people, and you say you studied philosophy there, but that's not a new phenomena, and you may be able to address this better than me, as far as where maybe someone that has a mental illness, and we all have mental differences. I'm not suggesting we don't, but the homelessness issue is not purely economic. It's not just pure economics, but I would like to suggest, if it's feasible, is to have a massive, major recycling center where the homeless could participate in sorting the materials. We Americans throw so much away. And with technology now, we ought to have some way. And I know we've got Goodwill and Value Villages and all, but there should be some way to redirect these materials that are being thrown away to people in need, or be recycled somehow. They're opening a massive plastics plant near Macon, Georgia, that's going to be able to take the polycarbons out of the plastic and make fluid plastic for reuse, one of the first in the country. And we could supply that plant in Macon, Georgia. And I'm thinking, can we have a center where the homeless could participate in sorting materials and maybe reside at the center? Not that we want to shuffle them off into abstract where they disappear, but that they may even get paid and have lodging and care to an extent. I know when I was growing up there, there was Milledgeville, the mental institution in Milledgeville, Georgia. That used to be the state capital, by the way, Milledgeville. But you'd hear people say, "Oh, I don't want to go to I don't want to get sent to Milledgeville." And well, it served a purpose, I'm sure. And then it closed. So we don't have the facilities to accommodate the needy for the mentally challenged community, and that's a problem. And that converts into homelessness typically. And
well, I heard a solution in there, so that's good. We're treading in the right direction.
Well, I mean, and along those lines, I think that we could take used truck and automobile tires and have a shredding facility where we shred our own truck and tires and make asphalt. We can make our own asphalt for our roadways.
Got it.
I mean, there's different ideas. There's different things we could do to make it
got an entrepreneurial spirit. Yeah, no, I hear it. Let me give you another question that came in from online. This was an anonymous question, so I don't have the name of the person who asked it, but they said, how will you ensure new developments on the south side of Atlanta are expedited as quickly as the ones that are on the north? So they cited an example that there are grocery stores and coffee shops that seem to be built very fast over the past few years, but very few of those things exist below I-20. So what would that look like under your administration?
And I've lived south of I-20 for 43 years, so I'm familiar with that. But I'm glad you mentioned the word developments, because that's a topic that I have said jokingly that maybe what Atlanta needs is two mayors, one for the developers and one for the citizens, and that I would be the citizens mayor, because what
That's
I
so
see
petty. I like it. That is
well, I mean, it stands to reason if you think about it. But what has happened, and it took me a while to formulate this, but I think it's the case. I'd like to know for certain, but I believe it's the case, is the developers are getting tax credits for building these. And I'm coming back to developing on the south side. I understand the question, but first I want to address this about developers. Developers are getting tax credits. And businesses get tax credits. So incomes, new persons, and new obligations for the city, of course, but higher wage citizens these higher wage citizens with the businesses that get tax credit, now they want to buy a property. So they go buy a property, and now the neighbors say, oh, this area is being gentrified. And I've gone on record to say, and people will gasp when that I think gentrification is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with somebody painting their front porch and washing their car and planting flowers and making nice. Gentrification, look it up. Gentrification is a good thing. The problem is it increases the property tax to the legacy residents. That's the problem. And that goes back to the commercial class being underassessed. And these businesses getting tax credits, high wage employees, and they displace the legacy residents, and then the property taxes go up. That's the issue. That's one of the big issues with affordable housing. But developing on the south side, the money follows the money. I mean, economics, maybe it's 201, not 101, but the money's going to follow the money, and you're not going to put a coffee shop in a neighborhood where there's poverty and people can't buy a cup of coffee in the first place. A businessman's not going to put a coffee shop there. And I would think you'd have to maybe give tax credits for special targeted areas, special targeted neighborhoods. That's where the tax credit ought to go, and not
exist, right?
Not in Midtown.
Yeah.
Not 15th Street in Midtown.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, specialized tax credits definitely exist. There are those types of targeted, whether it's the tax allocation districts themselves or that is the intention. Whether it actually plays out that way, is a different story.
This is going to sound somewhat absurd, but somebody may appreciate it. And I don't want to pick just on Walmart, but when the money leaves the community, how does the money come back into the community? So here's a community that's not the best off to begin with, and those dollars leave. They go to Arkansas, or they go to a business that's not even in Atlanta, and those dollars disappear, and that community is left with less dollars. When a community can self-circulate the monetary assets, they're better off. I mean, that's what needs to be promoted, where the community self-circulates their own assets.
Yeah. Glenn, I got a couple other questions online, and then we got to wrap up. But
I understand.
Thank you for your time so far. So I wanted to ask, there's a question that came in around equity in transportation. So this question comes from Christina Remlin, who asks, how would you increase equity in transportation? I'd actually first love to hear, how do you define equity? And then I would love to know how you increase it.
That's a really good question, defining equity. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I don't think just off the cuff I could give you a brilliant answer. I
don't need a brilliant answer. You've had no trouble being honest and open with what you got, putting your cards out. You should be able to do that with the word equity.
Well, I mean, it's what's fair, I guess, but equity in transportation, are we saying have a staggered fee arrangement, a fee structure where if you have
question says nothing of the sort. It's just in transportation, how would you increase equity? I mean, if you need a phone a friend here, which is maybe what was happening, I would say, I would say that, it's clear that, again, in certain neighborhoods, mobility or the ability to get from point A to point B, what transportation options exist in a particular neighborhood versus another neighborhood, are often limited based on identity, race, class, etc.
Well, it's there again. It's economic, but I know that I read the newspaper every day. I know that the MARTA bus routes being affected with the pandemic, they discontinued bus routes, so they've restarted some, but everybody pays the same fee. That itself may be a problem. Although I think there's some discounts for eligible parties, but equity in transportation is key to be able to be mobile. Fortunately, now technology has de-emphasized the need to be present, as evidenced by our meeting now. But I'd have to think about that, equity in transportation. I think you'd have to have some sort of a plan where you could target areas that needed that wasn't getting the transportation. That sounds like a MARTA question to me more than city government. But
gotcha. Well, transportation is more than buses and automobiles. And bikes. It's also just the concept of mobility from point A to point B, which could be you can't get there because the sidewalks aren't fixed. So if you're in a wheelchair, you can't get there, etc. There's a lot of mobility issues when it comes to transportation.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Let me close on.
I'm sorry, whoever asked that question. I didn't do a better job answering it, but I think we need to have somebody in the mayor's office that'll tell you we don't have an answer to something, but we're working on it, instead of giving. I'm big on this empty promises. Yeah. I'm tired of empty promises.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we got a new T-shirt concept for you, so it'll be good. So I want to end on, because you brought it up in the beginning of the conversation. I think it's very important to the work that CCI does. We recently did a study and provided recommendations on improvements to the City of Atlanta's neighborhood planning unit system. And I wanted to get a sense of your views on the neighborhood planning unit system and what role community engagement and civic participation should play in local decision making. What would that look like for you?
Oh, I think that's an integral part of planning, is to have the local input. There's I've thought in terms of rights, what we might call rights. We've heard more about that over the years now, and individual rights and community rights, I think at no point should we have individual aspirations override community rights. But I think I would insist that the local planning boards or NPUs have substantial input. And by the way, and you know this, and the audience probably knows this, the city council makes most, if not all, of the decisions when they vote on changes. So I think that the city council would be responsive to the NPUs and to the planning units, the local in their districts. I would encourage that, and I wouldn't stand in the way of it. I don't think that's the mayor's obligation to direct the local input. I think that he should encourage it and provide a mechanism and not discourage the input. But I don't think the mayor's sole response. It's not his responsibility. That I think the council members should have greater input. And by the way, that's another thing I've said, by the way, twice now in the same paragraph. But I think it would be wise for me as mayor to work close with the city council members. Yeah. And I don't know that that's been the case in the past.
Well, I think they definitely have some council members that work close. It doesn't mean it's a good thing, right? I think that sometimes that means that we get behind the scenes deals and behind the scenes conversations that don't. So, I mean, close is one thing. Transparently and
transparent.
Joint vision is, I think, a different thing. So, yeah.
Well, I'm in favor of local input through the NPU, through the planning committees, and on through the city council members and on to the mayor's office, because he's the one that signs off on things.
Yeah.
once the council approves.
Got it. Well, Glenn, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your candor and your honesty. I think that there are 14 folks who are running for mayor. Our job has been to make sure that we speak to every single candidate. That your voice is important in this process. So we're grateful that you put your hat in the ring. If I could leave you with you got some stuff that you're bringing attention to that maybe other candidates have not fully expressed or talked about. So anytime you're given that platform, I would encourage you to keep punching at those things, because there are some things that you brought up that are the first time we're having that type of conversation with candidates. So I'm appreciative of that.
And and if I may, I want to mention to the audience that I know the buzzwords of transparency, sustainability, accountability. I'm familiar with those buzzwords to get elected, and you didn't hear me say them very often, but I think those go without saying, that would be part of the responsibility, is to be open and honest and do a good job. That's what we need. We need somebody that's going to be focused on doing a good job.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's where I come in.
Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. For everyone who's listening, we have one more mayoral conversation, unless one of the three folks who have not responded to our requests end up responding. We're happy to entertain those conversations. But we have interviewed just about every candidate for mayor. We have one more with Mark Hamad, so I'm looking forward to that conversation. Also, next Friday, October the 8th, from 6 to 8 p.m., we will be having a candidate forum for city council president. We will have 4 candidates in attendance out of the 5 who are going to be running for office. So tune in for that. Also, for those of you who are interested in hearing from some of the mayoral candidates, this Friday there is a mayoral forum that is focused on homelessness and response to policing and crime, and it's going to be a great forum with about 5 candidates confirmed for that. That's being led by Partners for Home and PAD. You can definitely learn more about that on voteatl.org. We have all of the upcoming forums, whether they're CCI related or not, are all up on the website. It's also an opportunity for you to learn about what does the mayor do, what does city council do, what does the council president do, what does school board do. But most of all, we want to make sure that you vote. You should check your registration. October 4th is the registration deadline. So we want to make sure that you go to the Secretary of State's website, make sure that you are registered, check everything, check your address, all of that. We know funky things can happen. So just check that before October the 4th in case you got to do something about it. And then early voting will begin soon thereafter. And the election itself is on November the 2nd. We will continue to provide this information and content to the public. It is available and open on our website, voteatl.org. And we're looking forward to continuing the conversation and making sure that you are informed about the decisions that are going to be made. Where we're going to have a new mayor, we're going to have a new city council, we're going to have a new school board. So your engagement is extremely important. Thank you to the Connect, Blue and Green Consulting, and Community Movement Builders, and the number of other community partners that have helped support this effort. We will see you all soon. Thank you so much.